The Nazi rise to power can be attributed to a number of factors, including social, economic, political, and cultural aspects. The ending of World War One and the Treaty of Versailles created huge problems for both the German people and economy. The fact that the Weimar government was viewed negatively by the Germans, combined this with the issues of the Treaty of Versailles and the stock market crash, helped to cultivate Germany for Hitler and the Nazi Party's rise to power. The Treaty of Versailles was one of 5 treaties designed at the Paris Peace Conference at the conclusion of World War One. Germany reluctantly signed the Treaty of Versailles on the 28th of June 1919. The common ideal at the time for the victors of World War One, France in particular, was that Germany should be completely smashed and dismantled. The consequences of the Treaty of Versailles, both social, economic, and political, inevitably sets up the scene for a Nazi rise to power. Firstly, as will be discussed in more detail later, the general German attitude towards the treaty was very negative. It was seen as a very unfair treatment to the nation. A particular article of the treaty was to create much turmoil. Article 231 states that the Allied and associated governments affirm and Germany accepts the responsibility of Germany and her allies for causing all the loss and damage to which the Allied and associated governments and their nationals have been subjected to as a consequence of the war imposed upon them by the aggression of Germany and her allies. Not only was there much resentment to the treaty as a whole, but much resentment was targeted at the new Weimar government, who were forced to sign it. The belief began to circulate that the politicians had lost the war, and not the army. Adolf Hitler, during his ascent to power, used his discontent and anger towards the signing of the treaty to formulate the notion that is now known as the concept of the stab in the back. This became an integral part of the Nazi ideology, who portrayed the Weimar Republic as a morass of corruption and national humiliation, run by Jews, Marxists, and cultural Bolsheviks who betrayed the nation and seized power. It is clear politically that the Treaty of Versailles cultivated Germany for a Nazi ascension to power. Already stating that Germany held full responsibility for causing the war, the Treaty of Versailles had a number of other articles that greatly affected Germany. These included Germany losing approximately 13.5% of its 1914 territory, as well as losing all foreign colonies. The army was also limited to just 100,000 men, and a ban applied to the production and use of artillery, tanks, gas, and aircraft, among other things. Similar restrictions were also applied to the German Navy. However, perhaps the most relative articles of the treaty to the rise of the Nazis were the reparations. As stated in Article 231, Germany was responsible for the war. Therefore, they were charged with the financial cost of it. This was added up to be a total of some £6,600 million. Not only was this a ridiculously large sum of money, but many of Germany's wealthiest and most productive provinces had been taken off them. As will be discussed later, due to the sheer amount of reparations and poor economical status, the Great Depression and the stock market crash hits Germany far harder than any other nation. The Nazi Party were in fact able to use the financial crash as a much-needed boost to their public support. The Nazi rise to power occurred due to the many factors, but it is quite apparent that the Treaty of Versailles cultivated Germany for Hitler. In November 1918, a parliamentary republic was proclaimed in Germany. The old German Empire was replaced, and from the defeat of World War I, the Weimar Republic was born. Yet the Republic was created out of defeat and anger, existed in near civil war conditions, and due to the Treaty of Versailles, was left with massive financial and political problems. It is a still hotly debated subject today whether or not the Weimar Republic was doomed from the start, or whether its demise was due to the choices and decisions of individuals within the democracy. One thing, however, is certain. That is that a number of select decisions, conditions, and events linked with the Republic can be seen as directly leading to the Nazi rise of power. Towards the end of World War I, there was growing civil unrest in Germany. Not only was there foreign pressure on the government in regards to the ensuing peace treaties, but also pressure from below, including the desire of the military wanting to escape the blame for an unacceptable end to the war in the eyes of the German nation. It became apparent to the leaders of the army to hand over power to a civilian government in order to create a scapegoat for their failure. The following events, including the Revolution of 1918 within Germany, essentially influenced the change from empire to republic. Yet crucially, it failed to change the structure of the socio-economic aspect of Germany, nor were the key elites subject to reform. The army, judiciary, and bureaucratic establishments all retained their positions of influence and power. These powers used their influence to speak and act in the main against the newly founded Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic was not viewed with a positive light for many Germans. Despite its eventual yet short-lived semi-stabilization before the stock market crash, many patriotic Germans blamed the Republic for the result of World War I. The November Criminals was a name given to the negotiators of the armistice and the same men who would create and then run the Weimar Republic in its early years. Many Germans felt betrayed by the armistice as they felt the November Criminals had stopped a war that Germany could still win. This viewpoint was largely a result of the actual progress of the war, including the depleting manpower, munitions, and food, being highly censored. Also, as the majority of combat took place in foreign borders, Germans on a whole were generally totally unprepared and shocked by their defeat and surrender. The anger and resentment that lingered in Germany over the surrender, also on the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles, created a unique scenario in which the country was aching for a charismatic personality who could unify Germany by promising the people that he could restore their greatness once again. That personality turned out to be the leader of the Nazi Party, Adolf Hitler. Perhaps the most notorious aspect of the Weimar Republic in relation to its downfall was the Weimar Constitution. The Constitution took effect on the 11th of August 1919 and had a considerable number of flaws, some of which were fatal. It stated that a president would be elected via direct popular vote for 7 years. This provided a president with exclusive powers over Germany for nearly a decade. The president was able to appoint and dismiss chancellors, he had the right to dissolve parliament and to call new elections, and the most infamous of the president's powers was presented in Article Number 48, which is the right to rule by emergency decree. Essentially, this gave the president supreme and unquestionable power in a time of emergency. This constitutional flaw can be directly linked to the Nazi rise to power, as in 1933, not long after being named Chancellor of Germany, Hitler, claiming that the Reichstag fire was in fact an attack from communists, convinced President von Hindenburg to sign the Reichstag fire decree. On the decree, and on the basis of Article 48, the government was given authority to curtail constitutional rights. The Nazis essentially used Article 48 to use their power to suppress all opposition in a now legal way. It is even said by historian Eric D. Weitz that the powers granted to the president in emergency situations were far too extensive. On October 29, 1929, the world entered into a severe economic depression due to the stock market crash in the US. Not only did the Great Depression affect nations everywhere, but Germany was devastated. As previously discussed, Germany was forced to pay reparations as consequence for starting World War I, as stated in the Treaty of Versailles. Germany was in no position to realistically pay the reparations while still trying to stabilize its own economy. Issues of unemployment and hyperinflation plagued the German people. America, acknowledging the struggle of the Weimar Republic, created huge loans to Germany, first in the Dawes Plan of 1924 and later the Young Plan in 1929. This boost was drastically needed by Germany. However, when the stock market crashed, America's economy was devastated and needed the loans back to help fix its own faltering economy. No other nation was in any position to help the now crippled German economy, and the Weimar Republic was effectively bankrupt by the end of 1929. Companies within Germany went bankrupt and the unemployment count skyrocketed, with, by 1933, over 6 million Germans finding themselves unemployed. To try and repay the loans and reparations still bearing down on Germany, the Weimar government increased taxes to try and reduce the budget deficit. As one can expect, public discontent was soaring. Anger and frustration towards an unfair treatment post-World War I drastically reduced living conditions and the fact that the government was unable to help the people. It was a precarious time for the Weimar Republic and for the people of Germany. For Hitler, however, he remarked that, "Never in my life have I been so well disposed and inwardly contented as in these days, for hard reality has opened the eyes of millions of Germans." With no apparent end to the woes of the people under the Weimar regime, people began trying to look for more radical political parties, in particular the Nazis. In 1930, the Nazis gained 143 seats in the Reichstag election. In 1932, another 230 seats had been gained, making them the largest party in the Reichstag. It is apparent that in accounting for the Nazi rise to power, the stock market crash led to a vast increase in the Nazi Party's popularity and public support, inevitably leading to Hitler's ascent to the power and leader of Germany. So far, this podcast has discussed a number of prime factors that contributed to Hitler's rise to power. However, there is one factor that cannot be ignored and is perhaps the most important, and that is the Nazis themselves. At the age of 30, Hitler joined the German Workers' Party in 1919. It became apparent that Hitler was not only determined to make his party succeed, but that he was a very charismatic figurehead and talented speaker. After Hitler's first ever time speaking at one of the party's scheduled meetings, over 300 marks in donations were left, in results of his highly emotional speaking style. Attendance to these meetings began increasing as Hitler became the main event. It is evident even in the beginning that Hitler was the charismatic leader that Germany craved. It wasn't just the way that Hitler talked to the public, it was also the topics being spoken of. The fact that Hitler spoke against the Treaty of Versailles, blamed the Jews for Germany's problems, and shared the fear that there could potentially be a widespread communist revolution in Germany, similar to that in Russia, made him very relatable. The German people rallied to Hitler for his charisma and the fact that he understood what his listeners wanted to hear. Hitler's own personality and speaking skills are directly linked with his rise to power. Germany was ripe for a vigorous leader to take charge. However, not anybody would have been able to rise up for the masses. Germany had a unique situation, and Hitler was a unique person. However, Hitler wasn't the sole reason behind his rise to power. The Nazi Party itself was largely responsible for its success. Along with a charismatic leader, the Nazis' policies, known as the 25 Points, were hugely instrumental. In a brief summary, the 25 Points included the rejection of the Treaty of Versailles, the unification of all Germans in a greater Reich, the demand for additional territories for the German people, as well as anti-Semitic views, including citizenship determined by race with no Jew to be considered German, and religious freedom except for religions that endanger the German race. These policies resounded greatly with the people of Germany. Not only did Germany now have a figurehead to rally around, they had a political party that shared many of the same views as the public. The Nazi rise to power can be put down as much to the individual brilliance of Hitler and the Nazi Party as it can be to other external factors. It is apparent that the Nazis' rise to power was attributed to a wide variety of factors. The issues that the Treaty of Versailles presented undoubtedly set up Germany for a leader such as Hitler to rise up and lead the German people back to greatness. The fact that the Weimar Republic was publicly viewed as politicians who betrayed the people also greatly contributed to the Nazis' rise to power. The issues the government tried to deal with, along with the flawed constitution, essentially granted relatively easily access to the power of Germany for Hitler. Alongside all these factors, the Great Depression destroyed Germany economically, and with no solution in sight from the Republic, the Nazis were turned to for more radical solutions. The stock market crash led to a huge boost of popularity for the Nazi Party. Finally, the brilliance of Hitler and the Nazi Party themselves accounted largely for their success and rise to power, through propaganda, charisma, and political tact. Overall, these factors, situations, and events all contributed to the rise of Nazi power in Germany.